Billy,
With me?
what are you listening to?
I don't know. I was Facebooking and trying to find us. Have you
Ah,
heard them?
so I was
It's
like, what is going on with these? Something about clean socks.
yeah. It's funny. She shocks him with innuendo. I was trying to
See,
find us. I don't know how to do it. Innuendo. I was trying to find us. I still haven't. I need to find these things.
yeah, you
Hey,
do.
right there. I can go to that group and find it.
Yes, that's one way you can find it. Um,
So I'm there.
I'm having trouble with the chat though. So let's see if this works. Uh, hello.
I'm here. Doesn't show up.
I'm not seeing the chat. I thought I had this worked out.
It did not show up on my laptop.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Still nothing. Well, this is going to be a
I've
bummer
got nothing.
because I don't know how to get the chat. Now it's like, all right, let's see.
It's okay. I don't know how to make it live. If we're not live yet,
What?
right? So,
Yeah, we are live. Yes, we are. We are. It is
yeah.
10:02.
Why can I not get that?
Because
What
it's
do I
not
do?
working, and now this is an
So
amazing
the Facebook
experience for
Live
our
is not
watchers.
working?
Hmm.
So Facebook Live is not working?
No, Facebook Live is working. I can't get the chat to integrate for whatever reason, which is kind of annoying. Check this thing out here.
Facebook Live to show up. I should hate Facebook at this point.
Man, I don't think that's what I need to do. Frustrating. It was working a second ago.
So when I typed testing, it did not show up either.
Yeah.
Could you text to speech? That would be fun.
I wonder. Try the YouTube one. Nothing. Nothing in the little chat box. Maybe the chat box is oh. Mate. Oh, that's not it. No, let's see what happens when I do this. It's a big nothing.
I've not seen it.
I don't know. I don't know what to do at this point.
What have you done differently?
That's what I was trying to think about.
just a guess.
Yeah, I got the URL. Uh, it's just not showing up. I don't know if it's not even going. The thing is, it's not even making it to the URL. Whatever we're doing, it's just not connected.
Right. Because it's
Nothing's.
not. I mean, like I said, it's not showing up on Facebook, or I don't know how to
No.
get it to show up.
I mean, this is just how it goes, right? When you're bad at this kind of stuff. I don't know why it just quit working though. And I
I
wouldn't I
don't want
wouldn't even.
YouTube Premium.
Yeah, yeah. I will say, listen, YouTube Premium is pretty great if you're doing this kind of stuff. So,
Yes, but I don't want to watch TV, and that's what they're trying to advertise for. Oh, how cute that I have a channel. I have a channel myself with 3 videos.
oh yeah.
Yeah. One was a youth group doing something in their classroom, in their youth room.
Man, this is
Another
a
was
bummer.
me trying to wire something.
Track the browser source in OBS for chat. I see Ed on Facebook. Windows minimized.
I didn't think about it being an OBS issue.
Yeah, that's what I've been trying to figure out as an OBS issue. So
I did think about it being
Windows minimized.
but the OBS part didn't register. That's
I don't have Windows minimized. Check browser source in OBS. So browser source, which would be the URL, right?
think so, but you've been doing this. I've never actually done it. I only used it for creating YouTube videos.
Why would the URL be changed? How would I change that? I wonder.
As all scientists around the world are. Well, not all scientists. That would be a false statement, so it would. Well, all scientists I'm aware of. Really? So you've never read any creation?
So if I'm in the Social Stream Ninja. There's a new version available. Maybe that would just do it.
Hey, YouTube.
I guess we'll give that a try and just see if that like makes it work again, I guess. I don't know.
I just got something. Ed Mantis says the SS browser page may have changed, so may need to update it in the source.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure how do I even get to that is what I'm curious about.
Hey Ed, how does he get to it?
Yeah, no, I mean he can hear me.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I thought I'd ask for you, just to help. Oh, Ed, thank you for your offer for help, but I don't think you understand. I live in Virginia.
I figure okay.
On a different subject, by the way, so you probably can't stop by on your lunch hour. I was about to say, I know this is the right one that I'm watching on YouTube because I'm wearing a purple shirt, and no, that's not really going to help.
Where do
I
I
wear a
do
lot of purple
this?
shirts. What is the SS browser?
The social stream is what it's called.
Oh,
It's like
okay, gotcha.
oh there. I'm seeing him now. Ed,
Yes,
Ed is
too
on
far
there.
from
Look,
me.
I didn't even do anything. This is ridiculous.
I told you he was on there, but he's on Facebook.
No, but I mean, like, yeah, he's on Facebook now, but like, I bet you everything's up and working.
I can't get it on Facebook, but that's because I don't know. I apparently don't know what I'm
It's
doing.
like if
Facebook.
I were to do it here, let's see. Yeah, there it goes for all. Yeah, with the thing that does all of them. Okay, whatever, man. I don't even. Who knows? Like, I didn't do anything different just now. I mean, I did download the new files, but like, so I hope. I saw Bubba was here, and
And Ed, that last one was me saying hello, Ed. Not
and
actually
Ed is
David.
here. So we've had a couple weeks since we've last talked.
I should put the
Anything?
live stream. What?
You mentioned to me that the Holston conference has made a stance on Christian nationalism.
Yes, that is correct.
What did they say?
So we had a resolution put forth that denounced Christian nationalism, and I should have had that pulled up. I don't have the finalized document because there were some edits made to it. One, the original document was a bit well, it said some forms of Christian nationalism are bad, and we took the some forms of off. In every place it
You
said
just
some
said
forms
all
of.
of it.
Yeah, all Christian nationalism is bad. And it said things that you and I have said, that nationalism in itself is, it has a racist background. It has this idea that we are superior to other people because we're American and all that. And you throw in the Christian nationalism, uh, which is
It's
a
even another subset
oxymoron.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an oxymoron as far as most real Christians are concerned.
I think
The idea,
I don't want to say the term nationalism in total, like by itself, like because I mean you can have like national pride for your like people in the Olympics or whatever,
well, that's patriotism, not nationalism.
or and say yeah, but I think you can also look at some like U.S. ideals if you're looking at them.
Yes, but nationalism by definition is the idea that your people, because of the nature of their nation, is
Yeah,
superior.
yeah, there's
And whether that is the only definition anybody understands that to be, that is how we defined it in the resolution.
right.
So Christian nationalism, where we're saying that first off, that implies that we're a Christian nation, that we were set up that way, and all of that kind of stuff, and that therefore that makes us somehow superior to every other nation, and all the people of the world are lesser than us, and are less deserving of our help, our concern. It doesn't matter, and so that that was a statement that I thought was profound enough for us to make, that a couple of people got up. One person got up to speak against it because he was a veteran. And, he said, Christian national, I'm proud to be a veteran, and I'm proud of this and that. So I had to get up and speak for the proposal because, and there was another woman who got up and she says, I'm a 26-year veteran, and I support this opposing of Christian nationalism because, and she had her valid reasons and said, this, it doesn't mean that I'm not proud of my service. It doesn't mean that I'm that I don't love my country. It doesn't mean any of those things. It means that I don't see myself and my country as somehow superior than everybody else, and that we have a special status because of it. And my statement was, I personally I have a brother who's a veteran. He's a year older than me. He's a veteran and served in Iraq. Went back at 41 years old to do that. My grandmother had 5 brothers who all served in World War II, and I'm named after one of them. So I was never going to be a veteran because I would never have been accepted because of my eyes. But so it was never in my plan to be a soldier of any kind. But I was raised in the Boy Scouts. I learned to value and respect the flag. So I started with, pointing out, this isn't about whether or not I'm a patriot or that I love America or anything like that. That's not at all what this is about. This is about that as a Christian, as a pastor, what I've seen over the years is flags being brought into the sanctuaries, and the blending together of Christianity and nation means that what ends up happening is that means that if I criticize the nation as a Christian,
it sort of becomes a criticism of your belief set too, right? Like
no, it
or
becomes
like your religion. Yeah, you criticize the nation, you've criticized your religion. You criticize religion, you've criticized the nation. I guess
you can't speak in my terms. You can't speak prophetically about things that are going on. You can't talk about brown people being terrified to go out during the day or night anywhere because they're afraid ICE is going to come after them, even if they're citizens. You can't talk about the atrocities of taking away food stamps because that's if your faith is intertwined with your politics and your politics is nationalism, then this is a purely Republican thing, really, in this case. And so if you criticize those policies, or even just talking about brown people being terrified. I have a friend who owns a restaurant in Etowah, Tennessee. She posted, how terrified she was. She's a full citizen of the United States. She came as a child, and she was, undocumented for a long time, and went through the process and all of that stuff to become a citizen. She said, "I am more scared today than I ever was when I was undocumented." And
so what's going on in LA is crazy right now.
Yeah, so what the church's role is to stand there in the midst of those people who are terrified and stand with them. It isn't about the politics of it. It's about the way it's being done and that people are being harmed. And as the church, we should be standing up for those that are being harmed, those that are being oppressed. And what happened, I preached about that one day, and people left the church. Not a whole lot. One couple left the church, never come back because Billy's preaching politics. I never said anything about politics. I never said anything about whether you agree with the policies or not, etc.
I mean, so it's just built in Matthew 25:35.
It is.
You don't have to even say it's political. You can just But you can just do that one.
If it criticizes their belief that what they believe in as political and what they believe in as from their political stance is intertwined with their faith, therefore anything that my party does that you criticize is criticizing both my nation and isn't Christian.
Right,
and
criticizing I'm saying, my religion as well, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm saying, it is not Christian for us to be intertwined with a nation. Jesus didn't die just so that we would be forgiven. Jesus died. He was killed because he stood up for the poor. He died because he stood up for those that were alienated from the society, because he was putting himself out there and risking his own livelihood, his own life, because he was saying, this is who I came for. I came for these that are rejected by society. I came for these that are poor. I came for these that have no standing in the world according to the powers that be.
Mhm.
And if you say that and you're intertwined and you're in this Christian nationalism idea, you can't even begin to say it. You wouldn't say that. Because that would be, as you said, criticizing both your faith and your nationality. So
Well, that's a great
anyway,
segue to about what we're about to talk about.
Yeah,
Because as we dive further into this conversation with Rhett McLaughlin, who we have mentioned before, was a member of Campus Crusade, and you had some commentary about that, and also is known for Good Mythical Morning and the content they produce there, and then he's over the years has come out as he's deconstructed, and this is a conversation he had with a pretty well known atheist, Alex O'Connor. And we are about to get to the part where he he's a lot of the dominoes are falling in his beliefs.
right.
And
So far, it's been Old Testament stuff, right?
right, like the really hard to believe stuff. And I think
A lot of that.
and I think that this is where maybe I don't know, people are going to have all kinds of beliefs about it, but the tradition that I think that if I had to define what you do is you're following in sort of the tradition of this parable form of teaching, right?
Well, yeah, that's how Jesus taught. So
Right. So you are you're looking for the bits of wisdom. I'm not sure how you feel about all the stories in the Bible, because I mean some of them are just crazy.
yeah, you're right. Jonah was not in a whale.
Well, it said fish anyway, didn't it? It didn't say whale.
Correct, but that's what we're taught as children, whale, because it's the biggest thing that's in the ocean.
Yeah, we think
So
of,
he
yeah.
said fish. So he also was not in a fish.
Yeah, I mean it's just like a ridiculous story. It's it's a story that's fascinating, but it's to tell, to give a point at the end, I guess, which is have faith in me or get eaten by a fish. Right? Isn't that what it is? I'm kidding, man. But no, it's more just get through the hard times, right?
No, he was put in the fish because he was disobeying God, and then it came out because of prayer, and you know I won't claim to be a scholar on this subject, but on that story, but I haven't preached on that ever.
Ever.
But ever, I don't ever remember preaching.
It is such a prominent story in the children's stuff.
It is.
Uh-oh.
Because
we lost you there for a second, I think.
Sorry, I moved. Am I still there?
Yeah, you're still there. You said so. I said it's such a prominent story in the children's lineup, and
I said for the fundamentalists especially, because it's this miraculous thing that only God could do,
mm-hmm.
and then it's about obedience. So Jonah finally comes to Nineveh and begins to do exactly what God said to do, and then everybody kind of falls in line, and they hear the word, and they repent, and the town is not destroyed. So yeah, I mean it's, and I don't argue with you that it's indoctrinating them young. I don't argue in that entirely, but I would also say that it's easy to teach children to focus on stories that have animals in them. They love Noah's Ark. They love this story. They
Yeah,
love
right.
the story.
But
I watch those because of the animals.
right. So anyway, let's start watching. And yeah, Bubba, for sure. The religion and the politics thing is like it's it's just a reason why we're here right now, and we're going through what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I don't even want to say, like, for, in some cases, like, I would like to think that Billy's strain of Christianity is not about, like, gathering up illegals and just throwing them across the border or whatever they're doing.
No. Our General Board of Church and Society is very much opposed to that.
Yeah, I mean, but like with some people have twisted it's just when you twist your religion to like do the things that are hateful that you want to do, that really bothers me. It doesn't matter if I'm a Christian or an atheist. I would hope, like, you're just saying, hey man,
it bothers me as much. It bothers me at least as much as it bothers you.
So anyway, let's watch old Rhett, and like, let's get this show on the road. See what he has to say.
In Rhett's position here.
Yeah.
Their hands in there.
I began to notice a pattern, and I think maybe I didn't even realize I was noticing a pattern yet, but this is the pattern that started then and then propagated itself throughout my entire deconstruction. And that is, there's a type of answer that someone gives when their allegiance is to the truth that they need to be true. And there's a type of answer that people who are actually interested in the truth give. And what I kept finding is that Christian apologetics, really consists of people who are like, well, the truth cannot be questioned. The truth, we've predetermined that this is true. And now we've got to find a way to buttress that truth. And there's a tenor to those arguments that they don't hold up very well under scrutiny. When you get the answer to the answer to the answer to the answer, you just keep finding it. Like, it just seems like these people seem to be interested in what actually happened, and these people seem to be interested in the truth that they hope that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a huge flip for me, because again, as a Christian, what I thought is, we have the truth. They have the desperate attempt to be anti-God, right? We were taught that these evolutionists, these professors who are teaching this kind of stuff, like, they're sinful, they're deceived, they desperately don't want God to exist, so therefore they got to come up with these ideas in order to explain them away. But when you're like, actually, first of all, most of these ideas came from Christians. The age of the earth, these geologists back in the day, these were just most people were Christians. It's just the fact of the matter. And they were like, oh, God must have done it in this way.
Yeah.
And then when they find evolution, okay, God must have done it in this way. And so the scientific stuff, there were plenty of people who talked to me like, it's okay, you can believe.
That's like for me, that was kind of like the thing that I kept going to, is like, every time we find something deeper, it would be, oh, well, that must be what he was doing then. Oh, that was what he was doing then. And it just kept moving, you kept moving the goalposts, right, in this kind of way.
Yeah.
So I do kind of feel what Rhett's saying right here.
So I do too, because I just watched a video. There's a woman that does, she's a biologist, but she talks about, basic, just educating people about how science works, the most basic things, And she said one of the questions she gets asked all the time is, why don't we teach evolution and creationism in science classes together? And the answer, the short answer is, because creationism isn't science.
Yeah.
Science is, here's evidence that tells us something. What does it tell us? Creationism is exactly what Rhett just described. We need to prove to you that the world is 10,000 years old.
Or it's flat, or it's,
Or it's flat, yeah. And there's absolutely no evidence to support that at all. Evolution is the one thing that is the most provable thing in biology. And you can't argue with, I couldn't argue with what he's saying because I agree with him.
Sure. Let's see what else he has to say.
You can believe that. You can be a theistic evolutionist. You probably still need to believe in a literal Adam and Eve because the atonement still needs to make sense. Original sin's got to make sense. And I was like, okay, yeah, those arguments seem like we're just trying to marry two disparate ideas.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay. But I just think that mentality of finding that the people, because it got into biblical scholarship after that. It got into, okay, well, the primeval history. So this is, I guess this is allegory. Like this didn't happen. These are religious myths that were adapted from other myths that were around at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
The flood didn't happen.
Yeah.
The Tower of Babel is a weird explanation for language. I started seeing all that, and so I was like, okay, now my entire view of the beginning of the Bible is different. And again, I would go to the apologetics answer, and I would be like, one person seems to be, like the critical scholars actually seem to be like interested in what happened. Like, why did these people write this? Why is it like this? Where did this idea come from? And then the Christian apologists seem to be like, well, we know it's God's word, so how do we prove it?
Mm-hmm.
And it just kept creeping closer and closer to Jesus. And I had this, this happened, this was years, right? Because I was like, well, I'm not going to stop believing in Jesus. You can have these weird ideas about the Old Testament, but like, Jesus is different. I mean, I have a personal relationship with him, and, and that stuff's true, right? The stuff about the resurrection, my arguments for why the resurrection had happened, and it being the best explanation for the beginning of the church and all this. I had those arguments in my back pocket. But long story short, eventually those arguments fell victim to the same type of critique. They're a little bit different because I do think that there's a more interesting conversation around the resurrection because you can kind of know a little bit less about what happened. And you can be somebody who believes all this stuff about that I might agree with related to evolution, but then be like, I have a faith position that Jesus actually rose from the dead.
Mm-hmm.
I recognize that it's not a scientific thing. I can't prove it. It is a little bit different category.
So
But
before
it
he goes
opened
further,
me
let
up
stop.
to.
So one of the things that I hear Rhett doing that is understandable considering the background that he came from, and I'm curious about your perspective on this. So Rhett is coming from a fundamentalist background.
Yeah.
That all of these things have to be true in order for, and let me say this, not true, factual. They all have to be factual and true in order for everything, so it's a house of cards that it's been built on, first off. It's this house of cards built on sand, because if this isn't true or that's not true, then the whole thing falls apart. And that is, as I really appreciate what he said when he said, the difference, the two types of people. There's the ones that have to, follow the evidence and find what is, seeking fact or truth. And then there's those that are trying to prove what they already believe. And that's what apologists are doing by nature, is trying to prove what they already believe. I'm curious, I know what church you came out of, but I also know that you had was it a grandmother, I think you said, that was
in Kentucky, she was more fundamentalist. Yeah.
Was the fundamentalism a part of what you were kind of taught, and was it a part of this literalistic view of the Bible?
I would say certainly from her. Yeah. I mean, gosh, I don't want to dog my grandmother out in Kentucky. She
well, no, I don't think it's just about.
she was a wonderful lady. She was as close as to a true believer as you could get, I would say, in terms of even the Old Testament is true. But she I don't know, you could tell that she sort of just so I don't know, maybe just sort of ignored like the parts that maybe didn't like make a whole lot of sense and just would default to like a God of the gaps argument is what we'd call it in atheism, where it's like you just wouldn't understand God's way. It's just God, it's mysterious.
Yeah, like the Trinity.
But there's no way, and I think I've referenced the Kalam as an argument before, which is basically an argument that says that everything comes from a creator, so therefore the universe was created. Therefore, it's this kind of one of those things. A little logic pretzel.
Yeah.
But so you kind of
what I'm.
Mhm.
Go ahead. I'll let you talk, and then I'll.
So she was fundamentalist, and she certainly had her effect on me in her own way, but I would say it was really early on. And when I was still readily to believe in miracles that could happen, right? Like,
Yeah, sure. Someone could live in a fish, or
but I mean, like, it's true because it's like you kind of get these like truths knocked down your whole life, and it starts kind of maybe even with like Santa Claus or something,
yeah.
Uh,
Well, the reason I ask all that is I've noticed that there is a difference in, and this isn't like new to this conversation entirely. Certainly there are people that have built their whole faith on the absolute truth of everything in the Bible.
mm-hmm. Well, I had
And
started to make like I started to reconcile a bunch of that, right? But once I got past we talked about it before. Once I started actually reading the Bible with an analytical perspective, and honestly, that was taught to me by the Methodist Church. It's like here's some analytical stuff. Here's like some historical things. We're gonna take a look at the area at the time, and I don't remember a whole lot about it, but I remember it was like, hey, this is serious Bible study. This is what they do in those adult Sunday school classrooms instead of paint pictures of Jonah and the whale.
Yeah, except that not in all the adult Sunday school classes.
Yeah, special pleading fallacy for the creator. Yeah, it's for sure. Yeah. Anyway, I maybe I've lost track a little bit, but my grandmother my grandparents, we talked about them on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
The Methodist Church is different. It's hard to even like. There are some people in the Methodist Church that are full on fundamentalists, like in terms of how they believe.
There's fewer of them now.
Yeah, it's less and less. But like when I was in church there, it wasn't like I was the only one who believed in the miracles. In fact, it went very much into. And
in that church, there was a group of the more fundamentalist ones there for sure.
Yeah, and so like they had a more literalist take on some things, and so you can even find that in the Methodist Church, which would be by most people's I guess estimation a more left leaning Christian church.
And since we've had this divide, the global Methodist folks and the others that left with them that didn't join that denomination for a variety of reasons, tended to be a large portion of those folks. If we had tried to pass a resolution condemning Christian nationalism 5 years ago, it would have been a lot more contentious a debate. This didn't just pass by a few votes. It wasn't like we had to have a count on the vote so we could decide. This was a nearly unanimous vote. There were some dissenters who voted against it, but it was mostly the whole of the body said, yes, we reject Christian nationalism. And my point of that is that because of that divide, the United Methodist Church is further left because a lot of the fundamentalists left. Not all of them. We still have certainly fundamentalists in my own congregation and every other congregation.
Yeah, but even beyond just fundamentalist in like the Christian nationalism kind of way, I'm talking about just people who believe like more of the miracle type stuff, right?
Right. Well,
Um,
that the fundamentalist would be, 100% on board with that. The liberals are going to be more looking at, somebody used the word, parable teaching earlier. We're going to look at the stories and recognize that there's multiple stories of the creation in the Bible. They were written by different people for different purposes, and they aren't meant to be told as, one of the things Rhett said was, well, you have to believe in Adam and Eve. No, you don't, because there's no reason for us to believe that, to understand the idea that we're separated by God because of sin. It doesn't have to be two people, and we know biologically that's not likely. You know,
yeah,
so the idea that he's coming to this comes in part the way that, and I'm not saying that liberals wouldn't become atheists or moderates wouldn't go through a deconstruction either. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm suggesting the kind of deconstruction that he's going through has a very distinct flavor of, well, I came out of this fundamentalist movement, and all of the cards keep coming down, or is his term, dominoes continue to fall.
yeah. And that's and that's kind of the thing too. So then you finally get to this point where it's like, okay, let's talk about the like I don't know the main benefit of being a Christian in a way, and the what it actually meant for this story and for it to be true, right? Because I think the idea is the resurrection somehow proves that there will be an afterlife, right? And I think that we've talked about a lot of people are very much just interested in making sure the afterlife happens, right? So this is people that are having answers, so they search for questions to lead to that answer, and that was that's kind of what cut. I finally got to a point, I think, and he's going to tell his story, but for me it was more just I realized that all the miracles just started to fall down too. And then I was like, why am I believing it on this last miracle? So then I finally just said, I think this was just a story to tell us something too. But like at that point, I didn't quit calling myself a Christian. I just didn't believe in the miracle of it
Yeah,
all.
I get that. Yeah.
Um,
Long latitude. Uh,
that's Ed, by the way.
That is Ed. Oh, he's shifted. Okay.
Yeah.
When it comes to the Bible, is it more or less likely that those closer to the time of its creation or those in the modern day have a better interpretation? And of course, understand that the time of the Bible's creation is a broad spectrum of time, because if you're talking about when they created the Bible by putting these books together at the council in 300 or whatever, they would have had at least a better understanding of the languages they were looking at from a contextual sense. But if you're talking about when these stories were written, uh, the context in which they were read or shared um, certainly would have had a kind of meaning that we would probably miss because we don't have the societal connection to those things. Just think about, you know, uh, words change meaning over time, and we're not talking a vast amount of time. And they also have a different impact. I saw something they were talking about, words that somebody did a remake of something, and they were they were using the words that were from the era where they used words like fiddlesticks, and that seem quaint to us today. And so they had to shift them and start using the F word and the D word. They had to start using words that had the shock value of today, um, because it wasn't coming across as the way that the people heard it originally. And that's only, we're talking about 50 years or more. So some of the stories Jesus tells, for instance, would have been laughed at, and I don't mean in a sense of, well, that's a stupid story, and why would anybody tell that? No, they would have been humorous in the time that he told them. To us, they're just stories about seeds being thrown around. So I think, yes, they would certainly have understood them in a very different way than we could possibly today. But I also think that the interpretation of those stories today is framed by the dogmas that we've already accepted or adopted, because of the church we grew up in, or the denomination, or the theology we've read, or whatever our background is. People rather look for just like Rhett is saying, we look for the answer we want to find. And
do you want to take a jab at the Southern Baptist Church education, as Bubba just did?
Well, in part, I'm going to say, Bubba, the reason is because we started a lot of back in the day. The United Methodist Church was really about starting higher education. So originally, the Methodist movement was to the poorest folks, and it was a very poor group of people. And over time, as the church got established and money started flowing into and we're talking hundreds of, they would establish institutions of higher learning. They would establish high schools and all of that. And so education became a very big part of the movement of Methodism. John Wesley, the founder of the movement, of course, was a college-educated, seminary-educated priest, and at Oxford, some slouch of a school somewhere. And so education was very important to him as well. And we talk about scripture, tradition, experience, and reason as the Wesleyan quadrilateral, not words Wesley would have ever used, but this understanding that Wesley believed that we learn from all of those things. The scripture being primary, but still the tradition of the traditions of the church, and that's where some of the dogma comes in. The experience, our own personal experience with things, and also finally reason. We have to have within reason, as the video says down there. And the Southern Baptist Church in particular has become very intertwined with the Republican Party.
Well, that too. So there might be commentary about Republican voting states and education ranking cross sections or something. So
there might be.
Yeah. Let's
go.
Let's continue on with Rhett.
Questioning these sacred ideas. And it's just the most sacred idea of all, that Jesus was the Son of God who raised from the dead, eventually was the last domino to fall.
Wow. And how does that finally fall? I mean, because the evolution thing confronts, and I think the reason why it was so scandalous in the 19th century is kind of just a vibe shift, right? Because when you speak to philosophically minded Christians, they will quite correctly say, there is no argumentative syllogism you can construct which shows that because animals have a common ancestor, therefore God doesn't exist. That doesn't follow. There's no argument you can make from that. But it's hard to put into words just like the feeling. Again, it's like we were saying before about the indicating a direction of thought. When a society is based upon the idea that human beings are special and unique.
Yeah.
This idea, if you're smart, it doesn't need to undermine the idea that God exists, but it shows this direction of thought, like, oh gosh, we're not as special as we thought we were, and where's that going to lead? I'm pretty sure that in the first edition of The Origin of Species in 1859, that beautiful ending, there is grandeur in this view of life from many different species, whatever it is, having been breathed into many lives or into one, have been and are being evolved. And there's that phrase, like, having been breathed into one or to many, primordial forms of life. And presumably because of the backlash that this idea receives in the second edition of The Origin of Species, having been breathed by the Creator into one life or to many. Darwin
Right.
defaced the ending, his moving ending to the
Yeah.
origin of species. And I think by edition 3, it was back out again. So you can, I've seen one in person, an actual second
really?
edition at like a rare bookshop. If you happen to be in like a fancy rare bookshop and see if they've got a second edition, it will say by the creator,
Wow.
because there's just something so confronting about it that you need to respond to.
Hey,
But okay,
Darren.
there's that. And then there's the resurrection. That's not just like a vibe shift. This is the historical claim upon which Christianity is based. And like you say, it's less accessible to the scientific method because it's a singular event.
Yeah.
It's not like a process that's still going on today that we can biologically observe. And you can't scientifically or historically prove the resurrection, but you can prove like surrounding facts.
Yep.
You can say that Jesus was crucified, that his disciples claimed to see him, all of this kind of stuff. All of those arguments are still there and still sat in your mind. Presumably you're pretty familiar with them as someone
Yeah.
who specializes in outreach. Why would that change? Like what shifts the dial on those kinds of arguments for you?
And this is where I don't remember specifically like, okay, well, it was this book, it was that, but it could be something as simple. It was one aspect of that
Bubba.
argument, of that case. Probably the most
Wesley.
famous one is, well, why would the disciples die for a lie?
Mm-hmm.
And then when I really looked into that, and then I found that, well, I don't think I can actually historically defend that anyone died for something that they knew to be a lie. Like, I think that this can be explained by them being deceived, right? They could just be wrong about what they saw or their perspective. But I think the bigger picture was, as I started looking at different perspectives on the historical Jesus, I remember there was one book that was called The Historical Jesus, 5 Views.
Mm.
And I read that book, and I think every one of them was some kind of Christian.
Yeah,
just
sure.
Different gradations of liberal or progressive Christian. And everyone laid out
Your
their
cat
case
is
with
nuts.
a lot of confidence and a lot more scholarship and knowledge than I have about the
Mhm.
subject. But it was so gray. And I just started, this feeling began to creep in, which was like, okay, well, maybe he did rise from the dead, but what I've learned about the process of historical investigation, and also just the nature of human psychology and the nature of religious movements and the nature of people's willingness to believe things, like, it began to dawn on me that I don't know exactly what happened with Jesus. I don't know the nature of specifically the nature of his death. Like, was he left on the cross? Was he thrown into a large, like mass grave? Was he put into a rich man's grave by Joseph of Arimathea? Was that invented? I don't know. But what seems to be pretty clear to me is that it's almost certain that there's some explanation for how it all started that isn't that he actually raised from the dead.
Mm.
In my compulsion to believe that he raised from the dead, it is a religious position. It is a faith position. It's not an historically defensible position to the degree that these Christian apologists make it out to be. We were talking last night about Dale Allison, how I just think I love his book.
He's great.
And this was all like, I read that like 2 years ago. So this is all
Yeah.
way after my deconstruction, but I'm still interested in the subject. But, he's a Christian. He believes that it happened. But I think he's got one of the best books on the resurrection. The thing is so refreshing about it is he's not coming at this from like a Gary Habermas standpoint where he's like, this is the most reasonable thing. And if you don't agree with that, you're being unreasonable.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, no, we're talking about the pinnacle of an unreasonable idea, an unreasonable event. This is not, if this happened, this is something I have to accept on faith. And I am completely fine with people who do that. But my intuition is that it didn't happen. And I have sort of lost my ability to have faith in things that are just conjecture and things that I something that foundational.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so for me, it was just like, all this stuff kind of added up. And then it was very much the same. Like, I didn't even test it until I realized all the rest of the cards had fallen down. It was almost like it just kind of floated there, the cards. And all the other stuff, like the walking on the water, the water and the wine, the fish and the bread. All that stuff had fallen and you like, cause you just don't even want to bring it to that point yet because your whole life, you've been raised in this,
It's interesting. You mentioned the fish and the bread feeding the 5,000 and 4,000, depending on which story you're looking at.
Yeah.
I've always said, especially the one with the kid, who gives up his fish and his loaves. And I have preached on that a lot over the years. And I've always said that what if the miracle of that story wasn't some magic that was performed, but that people saw the kid sharing, so maybe they should start sharing? And to me, that's a much more interesting story that way. But that's not, that offends some people. They're like, oh no, it was God did this. And I'm like, well, but maybe,
Yeah,
maybe
it's like a
people
need
just
for
shared
it to
the
be
food.
magically good.
Yeah, why does it have to be magically delicious?
Magically delicious. Lucky Charms.
Lucky Charms.
Yeah, so and this is where he's going. It's just eventually you kind of get to the point where you're like, okay, so now I'm just like a guy who's like Christian in the way that like I believe in kind of like be good to each other, and I didn't know how to socially not be a Christian, yet.
Right.
So that was kind of
Well,
where
and you also were in the South, so
yeah,
it's a risk.
it's even risky to be like, hey, I'm an atheist. It's
You
not.
know,
It's not risky. What is annoying though? Like if I did, and I don't, but if I did want to run for office, I couldn't.
because of that. Yeah.
Yeah, in Tennessee, like you have to believe in a God.
Yeah, and not a God. You
Not
have to
the
believe in a
God, and a
fundamentalist
God. Like
conservative.
God. Yeah, it's I
You
don't.
have to believe in a fundamentalist conservative view of God through Jesus Christ.
Well,
You can't be
I
a
don't know.
liberal,
Well, you can. I think you can be a
not in
you
win
can
in
be a
Tennessee,
Muslim in Tennessee.
not in win in politics.
Not in win, but I'm just saying like you. I'm saying like it's on the books that you can't be an atheist.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's I'm pretty sure that the Constitution would
Yeah, the Constitution,
easily,
it's never been challenged. Now that goes to,
yeah. Because how do you prove somebody's an atheist versus proving they're a Christian? Because people can say they're Christian and not behave like a Christian at all, which would suggest they're not. So what's the proof?
yeah, I know.
I said so.
I mean, there's obvious pandering as well that like is thrown into this mix.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
anyway,
But I
let's
think
get,
it's interesting
yeah.
that this is where, at this moment in Rhett's story, you really do have a very similar story. That you've reached this point.
Yeah, because he was fundamentalist and I wasn't like, totally fundamentalist. But it was still, raised from birth in this kind of like miracle belief, supernatural belief set,
Yeah.
And again, like it did happen in this same kind of way, but like, I was definitely not as gung ho as he was, right? But I
I
found
bet he read
similarities.
more than both of us.
I'm sorry, what?
I bet he read more than both of us. I'll bet he read more than both of us.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of,
It just seems like.
I don't know, man. You went to seminary. How much I'm
I
sure you
don't,
did.
but I read because I have to most of the time. I'm a very slow reader, so I don't read volumes of stuff as much as he seems to be somebody who reads way more than I do.
I don't know. I think you're intellectually curious, though, right?
Sometimes, and sometimes I'm intellectually lazy, but that's also true for most of us, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, anyway.
And let me say something to Dara. She just said this is why Eli isn't a Boy Scout. As an Eagle Scout, one of the things I've kind of left the Boy Scouts in my past in many ways because of things like the stance that they started saying, well, no, you have to believe in a God. They didn't say you had to be Christian. They just said you have to believe in a God. When I was a Boy Scout, one of the things we did, the Scout laws, the last of the 12 laws is reverent. And there was a statement that came with that basically said you respect other people's beliefs, whatever they might be. That's a shortened version of it. But that meant you respected if they didn't believe as well. And somewhere along the line in the last, 40 years, whatever it is, I guess it's 40 now, that changed. And it also became we can't let gay people in the Scouts, and they went all that route. And I don't know where that came from because it wasn't a part of Scouts I grew up in.
That's sad.
And I went as a Boy Scout in the church. I mean, that's how I stayed in the church, actually. Yeah.
I mean,
And she
that's
says you
sad.
can't even be agnostic, and that's weird to me. It's wrong, is what it is. It's not just weird. It's just wrong.
All right, let's continue with Mr. Rhett.
I mean, I still have what I would call some level of religious faith. We can talk about what that might look like, but I think that my ability to have faith in the idea of the resurrection, it just was like, why would you choose for that to be the thing that you believed in when all these other things have sort of fallen apart
Yeah.
to
yeah,
this
sure.
process?
Came across an interesting idea. A friend told me. I wish I could remember exactly how this goes, but I'm pretty sure that there is a development as the Gospels go on about the description of the tomb. So, like in Mark's Gospel, presumably, I think it just says that Jesus is put in a tomb, and in Matthew's Gospel, it becomes a new tomb, and then I think by Luke, it's a new tomb in which no one had been laid, or maybe that's John. I can't remember the details, but there's things that you wouldn't notice that I'd never come across this idea before. If the empty tomb is an important apologetic to Jesus' resurrection, well, we know that the tomb was empty. In order to know that the tomb was empty, you need to ensure that Jesus was probably the only person laid in it, because otherwise it could have been mixed up with someone else or something like this. And so there is this hint at evidence of an early apologetical motive to make the tomb a new tomb, which means there's no other bodies in there, and then specifically a new tomb in which no one had been laid.
Right.
So that when they say there's an empty tomb, nobody can come along and say, well, are you sure it wasn't somebody else, or someone stole the body, or it got lost or something? No, it has to be an empty tomb. And so you're right that when those little questions, well, are we sure that he was taken down from the cross and laid in the tomb in the way that it's described? And if you start to notice apologetical motivations potentially in those very stories, it starts to undermine the historicity a little bit. Like how Matthew's Gospel is the only one that mentions the guards at the tomb.
Right.
And we're told why the guards, like we're told by Matthew essentially why he's included the story of the guards, because they are like, Jesus is gone, and the Jews pay the guards, and say, you're going to spread the rumor that the body got stolen. That's what you're going to do. And the guards are like, sure thing, we'll do that. We'll take that money. And this is a rumor that still persists to this day, says Matthew's Gospel.
And what's the best explanation for that?
Is it like there were actually guards and Matthew is the only person who happened to report them? Or has Matthew invented the guards as an apologetical tool, admitting that there is this rumor that the body was stolen, and thereby having to invent the guards at the tomb to protect against that? Maybe there were guards. Like, we can't prove that there weren't. But when you start to see how much potential apologetical motivation is underlying these claims in these Gospels, which, although broadly seeming to be attempts at historical biography, are also just full of what is probably best thought of as mythical storytelling, becomes really difficult. Dale Allison talks at length about the raising of the graves in Matthew's Gospel at the time of Jesus'
which
death.
is bonkers.
It's absolutely bonkers. But it's really strange how it's worded as well, because it says that when Jesus dies, it says at that moment when he dies, there's a great earthquake and all the graves open, and the holy ones of Jerusalem appear to people after the resurrection. And it's a really weird, clunky wording, because it says that the graves opened when Jesus died, but then it said that the people appeared to many after the resurrection, as if like they were just laying dead in the open tomb for 3 days or something. Like, it's weirdly worded, and you've got this, and Matthew's the only one who reports it, and you've got this undertone of Jesus being the firstborn of the dead, and it's like, okay, like Dale Allison is pretty convinced this didn't actually happen. It's another question whether Matthew thought it happened.
Right.
But the problem is that if Matthew didn't, okay, well, this is just a bit of myth that Matthew is obviously telling some kind of allegorical story. What does that mean? It means that Matthew is willing to make up stories about resurrecting people from the dead in order to serve a
If
theological
it happened
point.
once,
And then the floodgates are open, especially because Matthew's gospel is the earliest gospel that has any post-resurrection appearances
Right.
recorded in it. Boom, the doors are open.
yeah. Well, the thing that's so fascinating to me about this is, you know, famously,
Mhm.
evangelical Christians, especially when I was coming up in campus ministry, like we had our anti-Mormon arguments.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There was
Big game.
this one summer that some Mormon missionaries, like I was out of the country doing some missionary work, and Link was still in Raleigh, and there were Mormon missionaries that came to talk to him. They ended up coming back like 4 or 5 times because Link, at that time, especially at the time, wasn't controversial. It wasn't confrontational. He was just like, yeah, you guys. So they went through the whole spiel or whatever. And then when I got back, I was like, you let them come like 5 times? You didn't never challenge them? He was like, well, I was just kind of waiting. I ended up writing this like pamphlet. I would do this all the time. I would write like little papers or pamphlets or whatever. And there was one that was like, this is what you need to say the next time the Mormons come to your
Right.
door, right? Because you can take apart their theology and their history in a much, it's so recent, right? So that was my perspective. And I find it so interesting that the average Christian apologist, the level of scrutiny they apply to criticizing Mormonism, if they would just for a moment turn that level of scrutiny on their own story,
Yes.
you'd be like, guys, come on, do you see what you're doing? Or like, and if you had been born in a Muslim country and you were of the Muslim faith and you didn't believe that Jesus actually raised from the dead, what would your Muslim apologetic about the resurrection be? Like, do you really think these arguments are as strong, or is it just you need them to be true?
Yeah.
It's so foundational to who you are. You need this to be true. But the second aspect of it is,
It's like he's not
It's like-
looking at himself.
we're sitting here having this conversation in the context of 2025, where we have access to all this scholarship. And all this scholarship and all these discussions about these issues are such a recent phenomenon that, first of all, the tiny minority of people who live today, who call themselves Christians, care about this stuff and actually take time to think about it, right? You believe that Jesus rose from the dead if you're a Christian, probably because your parents told you. Like 90% because your parents told you. And then you got into a movement where it's continually confirmed by people who come in and they say some smart stuff about it, and this is why you can trust it. So even if it did happen, it doesn't feel like a really penetrating investigation into the historical circumstances is what's going to make it click and be like, oh, it did happen. I looked under the last rock of history and I found the resurrection. Like, it doesn't seem like God intended for that to be the way. If
That's right.
this is clearly this is a revelation. This is like, this is a secret. This is like God's secret information that you can choose to believe. And then your life is transformed. Like, I'm okay with people who frame it in that way. I'm like, well, I still think that I think this is a psychological phenomenon. I don't believe it. I'm a skeptic in that regard, but I just find it so interesting the way that some of these apologists go so hard on trying to prove it. It's like, do you really think that that's gonna be the thing that changes somebody's mind?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like it's what Jesus was doing.
No,
Verily I say unto you, premise 1.
yeah, he wasn't doing apologetics.
It doesn't work like that. It's clearly like not what it's all about.
Right.
And apologetics can only take you so far. I mean, there is this idea online in particular that to be a Christian or to be religious is to essentially do natural theology, is what they call it, which is like arguing for the existence of God. Like, the whole religion discussion has become consumed with God's existence, biblical scholarship, and we forget that it's actually an assumption, and a controversial assumption, that is the approach to have to this conversation. For many people, like, natural theology is just a waste of time and an improper approach to the question of God's existence. And most people who have a religious experience will report that. Thomas Aquinas famously didn't finish the Summa Theologica, the greatest Christian metaphysician of all time. And he doesn't finish it because he's performing Mass, he's performing the Eucharist, and he has a religious experience.
Right.
And his like friend or colleague or whatever is like writing to him, begging him, you have to finish this, Thomas. Like this is, you've got to finish. And he says, I can write no more. It's all straw compared to what I've seen. And you're right about the double standard as well. I just had a Mormon on my show, Jacob Hansen, who one of the key things that he likes to emphasize, he doesn't usually speak to atheists. This is quite funny. I saw him recently, and he says he doesn't usually speak to atheists because there are so many like metaphysical assumptions you have to make. If you want to talk about Mormonism, you already sound absolutely mental. If you're talking to someone who doesn't even already believe in like angels and God and stuff, you're not going to move an inch. But he's like, I always talk to Christians because they do believe in angels and revelation and prophets and all this kind of stuff. And he can kind of like hold up a mirror to these Christians because they look at him and be like, oh yeah, so like, you know, God spoke to some dude in upstate New York through some like golden plates that like no one's ever seen, you know, and he's like, yeah, well, how many witnesses?
So I'm not gonna, you know, it happened with me with my Mormon friends too. You know, I had some Mormon friends in high school, and you know, I didn't, I just knew about them and they seemed happy, but like, you know, I think I don't want to put words in like maybe my mom's mouth or something, you know. Dad rarely had anything to say about anybody else's religion, but my mom might say something like they believe something crazy or something, you know. But it may not have even been her, so I don't want to make sure. I want to make sure everybody knows that it wasn't her, right? It might have been somebody else that I heard say something to this effect. And it's like, when you have this happen, and it's like, okay, so you go and examine the Mormon belief, right? And it has some like, you know, we've annexed some ideas on some Joseph Smith ideas, right? And that whole story is pretty crazy anyway, how that's supposedly have gone down. Credit to the Book of Mormon and South Park for many of our educations on that.
I really need to see that play.
Yeah, I mean the play, but also just see the South Park episode. It's, you know, so.
Well, there's only been, what, 4,000 of those, so I'll pick the right one.
You know, I mean, there's one specifically called the Book of Mormon. That's a South Park episode. I can't tell you which one it is, number, but like that's where it came from, right?
From the play.
Yeah, no, the play came from South Park.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So
anyway, go on.
But yeah, it's like, you know, you say, how they believe in magic underwear. Well, you know, you go up to the altar and pretend that when you eat this cracker, it becomes the flesh of Jesus. And when you drink the wine, it becomes the blood. Now, I'm not saying that I actually believe that, but I'm just saying, like, there are people out there that do.
Of course, that's a Catholic teaching that, you know, it actually becomes that.
That's right. But I mean, Catholic is, you know, it was kind of like the first-ish kind of one, you know, that was organized.
Yeah. No question.
So, you know, I mean, we have some derivatives, and then, you know, I think when you get to the Methodist Church, right, you have kind of gotten to the point where you're like, well, a lot of this stuff is just kind of like, you know, allegory and stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think John Wesley would probably disagree with that, but I don't think that would be rejected out of hand by everybody in the United Methodist Church today.
John Wesley would be like, no, Adam and Eve was true.
Yeah, I think John Wesley probably would have stood by, you know, it wouldn't be fundamentalism as much as it would be, how am I different? How's it different? First off, we've had a lot of science since John Wesley was around.
Yeah, could we say it like, what would John Wesley say in 2025?
What would John do? Yeah, I you know, that's interesting because within Methodism, not just United Methodism, but within Methodism, certainly all of us claim John Wesley. The fundamentalists, the conservatives, the moderates, the liberals, the progressives, we all claim John Wesley is the one that speaks for us. And part of that is because John Wesley does talk about personal holiness and personal piety and things like that, but he also talks about the need for social justice and mercy, and that all of those things would go together. That you need to have, as Rhett said, a relationship with God. That you need to have devotion and worship together with people and have a communion of believers. But you also have to balance that with how do I feed a hungry person or clothe a naked person, or the Matthew 25 stuff. But then also, how do I work to change the system? John Wesley was adamantly opposed to slavery and spoke out against American slavery as the vilest that ever saw the sun, which it might have been. But he put himself at risk standing up for people in prison, for especially debtors' prison, things like that, but also worked to change the system by creating credit unions so that people could, have access to their money in a way that actually helped them, not just was being stolen from them. So we all find something about John Wesley that we are drawn, and certainly his theology. If you read, I have a website that I go to study the lectionary scripture for each week, and there's a link to John Wesley's commentary on this particular text, whatever it is. And sometimes it's of course he had the King James version. He didn't have the ancient manuscripts that we have because of the Dead Sea Scrolls and others that have been found, etc. So my point of that is to say that we all would like to believe that John Wesley would be more liberal or more.
So like, if he came, so like if we Bill and Tedded him here, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And like gave him like a smartphone and said, hey, play around with this for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, exactly.
It has a Copilot on it, the AI. So like whenever you have a question, just ask it, and wonder what happens. And I wonder what happens in general with this. It'd be a fun experiment if we could just only Bill and Ted that thing.
What would he think about immigration and the way the policies are being?
Okay, so how about that? Like, what could we say about something like that? What would John Wesley say about, like, our current immigration fight and the protests and the
I personally think John Wesley
LA?
would stand up. I personally think that John Wesley would be offended by the way in which it's going on. And I think also I was looking this up recently, that the concept of borders in the way we think of them today, city states, I mean not city states, but nation states is the word I'm looking for. That concept of a strict boundary was just developing in the 1700s, and so John Wesley wouldn't necessarily understand, why would you build a wall? Why would you care about people coming from France to England and all that? There was a lot more free travel back then. And so that, first off, I think he would be confused by just the fact that we're so upset about it.
Right.
But I think he would also be upset by the racism involved in it. He would be upset by the cruelty at which it's being done. And I think that's something the church can still say. The cruelty, you can talk about deported, Obama deported a lot of people. All the presidents in the past, whatever time period, you can go back and see they've all deported a similar number of people, and maybe more so in the case of even Joe Biden. But the way in which it was done was somewhat different. There's a cruelty to it that is certainly something that he would oppose, I believe.
Yeah, we might have to take a week and just kind of see what's happening. Because, one of the first, one of the reasons why we're doing this project is because I made that video and that posted that I'm an atheist post.
Right.
But the follow-up video is like, now you see me the next day wearing a, Matthew 25:35 shirt that I have printed out. And then I asked the question, I was like, what do you think this looks like? When we decide that we need to deport 20 million people, what
Right.
do you think this
Exactly.
looks like? And this is what it looks like. And it
Yeah.
was just like, wow, I was like, and guys, I was like, I just want, I don't care if it's through your religion or what, you got to start like doing that caring about your neighbor thing, you know, and,
Exactly. Yeah.
you know, and for me, I'd long ago given up on the miracles, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but like, for me, I'm just like, you know, they kind of became not important, you know, the message that this was, right? And I think that we talked earlier and you said like, hey, there's something to be, you know, taken from, you know, the resurrection story, you know, for people that don't believe. And
Well, I said the Jesus story because that was the phrase you used. I didn't
well,
specifically
Jesus
say the
story, well, the
resurrection.
Jesus story in general, but I mean, even like
Yeah.
the resurrection, you know, is kind of like a symbol for, you know, I mean, I think it's just a symbol for like, you know, asking for forgiveness is, you know, a good thing to do, like true, earnest forgiveness,
You know,
right?
it's an interesting, very interesting concept. I'll have to think about that. I think that it's it's interesting to hear Rhett talk about the direction that the resurrection played in this deconstruction, but also to hear somebody who, you know, you're now removed from the church. You're not, you know, you're not tied to the dogma. You're in a place where you can look at it in a more objective way. Let me say it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And um, and because of that, you can see an allegory or a metaphor or something that somebody who's uh, um, religiosity is tied up into a very specific dogma cannot do, um, and and can get pretty darn defensive if something challenges that dogma. Since you're not challenged, the dogma doesn't challenge, you know, isn't challenged in your world because you don't have that belief. You can see that story very differently, and that's a good thing. I think that can. I think that's one thing that Christians need to learn to do is listen to people, especially those that have been leaving the church, because we need to understand that a part of the reason people leave the church is we're running them off because we're not living up to the standard we claim to live by. And uh, I think that's just that what your statement was is very interesting. That it's really kind of a message of it's good to ask for forgiveness. That seems very simple, but it also rings true. I think to me, and I don't mean factual. I mean truth. Uh,
Right. I mean,
uh,
you know, I mean, you take these stories and like, hey, what can I still take from this, right? Like, I can't look
yeah,
to the Bible as any source of truth, right?
right.
Like,
Certainly
uh,
not.
yeah. You know,
Well, let me.
I don't believe in heaven. I don't believe in hell. You know, I believe a lot of these constructs were designed for, you know, just to control people. I'm kind of just anti-authoritarian in like my nature, you know.
Yeah.
Um, you
Uh,
know, yeah.
it's so it's interesting. There's something I've heard more recently. I'm sure it's been out there, but I think I've heard it more recently because I've been, uh, you know, I've been telling my congregation, I'm talking to people who are atheists, not just you and the folks on here that might be, but I'm trying to do a better job of listening to people uh, outside of the church as a pastor, trying to understand how do we as a church reach people, and how do we what is it that people that may have left the church but haven't left the faith, even why have they left? And what I keep hearing over and over again is, well, you're not living up to it. But the argument I keep hearing from the dogmatic people is, well, you can't be an atheist and have any morals whatsoever because you have no foundation for your morals. And I just think that's laughable.
Yeah, but I mean,
I
like,
think that,
if you want to say, hey, no, you still are a Christian, and I'm like, no, I don't think the resurrection happened. No, I don't think the
yeah,
I don't
you
think
have to fit their mold.
I don't think the virgin birth happened. I don't think walking on the water happened. I don't think healing the blind happened. I don't think the fish and the bread. I don't think the water and the wine. I don't, none of it.
But do you believe that Jeremiah was a bullfrog?
Uh, um, I don't know. He's a
Sorry.
good friend of mine, but
The rhythm of that just had that in there. So, sorry.
yeah, you
Anyway,
know, maybe I had some like alliteration going or whatever you call it.
yeah.
But
But
you know,
but you know, why does a Christian, would I need to have you to be a Christian in order to believe you could be a good person? That's just insane, isn't
yeah, I just, you know, I mean, but like for me, it doesn't mean I don't, just because I don't believe in the supernatural of it. I mean, I can still jive by that, like, you know, be good to thy neighbor message, you know, accept the strength.
it?
Like these weren't things that like, I can find other religious texts that you can get this from. I can just really just kind of intuit it. Like if I'm really doing the empathy work where I'm like, let me put myself in this person's shoes who just walked from, you know, Panama to, you know, Texas on their feet, you know,
Mhm.
like, uh, to find a
Yeah,
better
I'm
life, you know, and then we're like, they're treated as criminals because it's not criminal to be illegally here. It's a
right.
misdemeanor to
Correct.
be to cross without documentation, and it's a misdemeanor, and it's just like, get out of here, man. People are talking about like this is some kind of crazy crime compared to like, you know, anything that could cause harm. um you know, it's like a speeding ticket. You know what I mean,
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah, I was looking at the comments. Bubba says the promise of an afterlife in paradise is designed for those who toil their lives away for others. And uh, the best example of that truth of what he's saying is, you know, there's a reason that enslaved people were faithful people, was because that's where the only hope they felt they had was in when we cross over, there's a better life ahead. That was all they had for hope. It's interesting because there's two periods in American history in the last 150 something years, a little more than that. Well, let's just say 200 years, um, where the church now looks back and says, well, we have these songs and genre of music that is all about that. That, oh, in the better, you know, we'll have a better life when we, you know, get there. We shall overcome.
mm-hmm,
And so first it's the African American spirituals front that came out of the enslaved folks. It came out of their desperation and their need for hope. Then there's the the worst of it is the flip side musically. The Gaither style music that they just kind of adopted, and that is from the 30s, from the Depression era, when people were saying, you know, it'll be better in the by and by. You know, we're going to get through this. Was the
mm-hmm.
kind of music that was out there, and let's be clear, the Gaithers is terrible music on every level, but it's bad theology and it's bad music. um,
But I mean,
but
the music language is like that's a meaningful part of the church.
absolutely it is, and it's interesting because that's what these two movements of music came out of, that desperation, and they're all about heaven. But there's a lot of other music that came out at different times that has different things to speak to us. So we mentioned Charles Wesley in the comments early, and a lot of John and Charles Wesley's music had to do with, you know, how do you live your life? Um, how do you do all the things you were talking about? And the other comment that I was going to comment on was uh, the next Dara says that logic is just crazy to me. It's easy to be a good person for the sake of being a good person, not because you're worried about eternal damnation. Not if you're not. And um, all those comments there are right on target in my book, because it's just insane to me that Christians feel like I have to fit you into my box in order for you to be a good person. It just makes no sense to me. And for some, it's, if you're a Muslim, if you're a Jew, if you're this or that, then you also can't be a good person because you didn't believe in Jesus.
Yeah, man, that to me that would be another proof that, like, it's not looking good for God, because it's like, you got these other religious denominations, not just denominations, but like different sects. And then there's like just people that like never had a chance, like the Shinto from Japan, and it's just like, really, he's
Right.
mad at those folks,
Yeah. Why? Yeah.
like,
And
golly, that just seems like a really bad.
so there's an interesting movie I saw earlier this past 12 months. And it's called the Man from Earth. The concept of the movie is there's this college professor who is getting ready to leave, and his friends all gather in a house as he's getting ready to leave. And they're chatting, and he says, I've never done this before, but I want to propose this idea. And the simple idea is that this man, who is the reason he's leaving, is because he doesn't age. And he doesn't age because he's lived since Neanderthal times. And he's lived through all of these things. And at one point in the conversation, he was one who studied with Buddha, and then he went to the Middle East, and he was Jesus. And it's a very interesting conversational movie. There's a follow-up movie that's not as good, but that one was really interesting, just as a thought experiment.
What is the name of it again?
The Man from Earth.
The Man from Earth.
Yeah, one of the characters in it is played by a Star Trek actor, and that's how I found it.
When was it made?
Well, I would say it's at least 15 years.
Okay.
I found it on Tubi.
So it's relatively modern, like 2010.
Yeah, I think that's about right. I'm not really.
Is that the case now though? Because like, man, if somebody said in 1985 it's relatively modern, it was made in 1970. But it doesn't feel like it's changed that much from 2025 to 2010. Am I right?
Well, the technology has.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like
2008 was when we kind of really, somewhere in that range was when we started to really see people getting smartphones.
But 1985, we at least had like cable TV, right? Like it wasn't all antenna.
We did have cable TV and prints. So
yeah. So anyway, let's continue with Rhett and Alex. I don't know. We kind of got off on a tangent there. Yeah, thanks, Jared.
I'm older than Luke, Dara.
Well, I mean, we did know you were my youth pastor, right?
You can see that by this.
Yeah. Well, I'm catching up.
This is, do you have to the resurrection that left any accounts?
Right.
Like, we've got more eyewitness testimony to the golden plates than you've got to the resurrection, And it's this, like, obviously I can look at this and think both of them are, not quite hitting the mark.
Right.
But his big gripe is like, I don't mind people saying that we don't have enough evidence or you're not convinced or whatever, but as a Christian, you can't switch that off when it comes to analyzing your own faith. And it does sound absurd to be like, oh, there was a prophet in New York, was there? But we've only just got used to the idea that religion comes from, that it comes from the Middle East. The whole reason why Jesus is born of Nazareth is like a lowly origin. They even say in the Gospels, is he the guy from Nazareth? What good comes from Nazareth? We're just used to it now. But at the time, that would have sounded about as crackpot as saying, this guy in upstate New York, yeah, he's found some golden plates and they're buried under the ground. And so I do find, like, I've talked about Mormonism a lot recently because I do find it holds up this interesting mirror to Christian apologetics. It's like, this is kind of how you sound, guys, a lot of the time.
Yeah. I certainly agree. It is this. And to have been on that side of it, and to,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I specifically, I don't still have that document that I wrote, the guide to talking to your
That is a
Mormon
shame.
friends.
I was going to ask.
I mean, it might be in some box somewhere, but I can tell
See you,
you
Derek.
Mm,
that it was
Hi, Derek.
incredibly dismissive, and I think
right.
that I was trying to be cute and funny at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm sure I was like essentially saying, "Can you believe that people believe this? Like, if you only knew how crazy this set of beliefs was, you would basically deny it on that,
Mm-hmm.
the fact of how crazy it was." But it's like, it's not any crazier. It's just less familiar.
Mm,
It's just less familiar than these things that we believe so wholeheartedly.
mm.
Um, yeah, but at the time, I mean, you can't see it. When you're in it, you can't see it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
You said at the time you said you started believing in natural selection and your wife's in tears. Does that like put you off? Do you think, oh gosh, maybe I shouldn't dig any further? Is it already an unstoppable force? Like, how does that go? Because presumably she's kind of okay with the evolution thing now. So
She's more than okay with it at this
yeah,
point.
like how does that like begin to develop? Do you just kind of keep going and say like, sorry, darling, but this is what I think, and there's nothing I can do about it?
Yeah, it moved very slow because, again, I didn't have all these YouTubers talking about this stuff.
Hmm.
I had to make the decision to be like, I'm going to buy this book and take the time to read it. And I'm still like living my life. I'm not like a voracious reader. I mean, I read quite a bit, but it's pretty slow.
Hmm.
And Link and I are trying to build a career, and we're
Mhm.
trying to like make ends meet. And this is early days of YouTube. So I was a bit scared of where this might lead. And I think I just had this idea, because again, where we come from, everyone else in our families are not just Christians, but they're strong, committed Christians. This is the most important thing in their life. We grew up looking down on cultural Christians. We could spot them. No, that person just goes to church because it's the thing to do. But we go to church because this is the most important thing that we could do, is having communion with other believers. And so I think that it moved very slowly because of that. I was getting into the historical Jesus stuff in like 2010. I like looking back at some of my journal entries, and that was when it was beginning to kind of fall apart. Like the Jesus part was falling apart. But we moved to LA in 2011. So one of the things that happened, Link and I had a series where we were making these local
Aha!
commercials.
It was the
Several
LA.
of them.
What's that?
I said, aha, it was LA that did it to us.
Oh, he lied to us, didn't he?
That's right.
He also said he was not a voracious reader, but he seems to quote a lot of books, so I don't know if I believe that either.
I know people that say they're not voracious readers who read, way more than the average
Yeah,
person.
right. Ed's he wanted to make sure that we saw his YouTube comment. We did see your YouTube comment, Ed. But yeah, I mean, you and I have talked about subjective morality and how it can shift depending, and we had that discussion some weeks ago when we were talking about like the death penalty and things of that nature. When we were talking about, is it right even at a point to kill, and self-defense comes up and capital punishment comes up and war comes up, right? So yeah, Billy, do you have any comments on I mean, like, that morality comes from God, or
No, I agree with Ed that the last part, you have to bit the bullet. I love typing. That morality is entirely subjective. I think that's true. From a religion standpoint, the subjectivity comes from how we see the world through our faith. But I don't think that, whatever that subjectivity is, it's still, um, it's still a way to look at the world and say, it's not bad for you to beat up. It's not good for you to beat up on people. It's not good for you to cheat people. It's not good for you to, you can see that people doing stuff that harm other people and go, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think you have to have God with that. I think everything is subjective in that sense. Are there any objective morals? I don't know that there are there? Can anybody think of something?
So, we've been down this path a little bit before, and I think that you can definitely really, truly put some qualifiers on it that gets to what I would call maybe it's just I can't think of it, but I would be like, this seems about as objective morality as I could get. But it's like with qualifiers, right? And man,
so
we're gonna go.
So, for instance, the argument about putting the 10 Commandments up is, well, these are really just objective laws. Well, first off, we won't get into all the lies on that. But killing people, objectively wrong or subjectively wrong?
Okay, so again, we could probably at least hear an argument for a time when killing, murdering, like for instance, in the case of self-defense,
Right.
that, and it's legitimate self-defense, and it, you could make a case for that killing, in the case of war, I'm not going to hold a soldier who is trying to take a position to the same standards as I am, like a serial rapist. And
Yeah.
So the qualifier that we came up with was like for pleasure, right?
Can't kill for pleasure.
Right. And rape for pleasure. And rape was even like, it's almost hard to do. You have to get in some definitional terms of rape, but like it's even harder to do because you really do have to make up some kind of like crazy situation. We talked about like a tribe that doesn't know any better and performs like a ritual, what we would consider to be not a great act, Billy, involving young men and elders of the community, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But like, we've had stuff like that before in a way, kind of Greek and Roman, culture at a time, how young men and or young boys and men were, anyway.
Right. And even in that, where you used a phrase, you said that they don't know any better. Well, why don't they know any better? Because there's some sort of subjection, there's some sort of, perspective that comes from their particular culture.
Right.
And
but if you put for pleasure, like, and if you added even more qualifiers, like systemically for pleasure or ritually for pleasure.
Then you get into, okay, this guy killed somebody. He didn't find pleasure in it, but he did it intentionally.
So if you put that qualifier on there, I think you can get to like this sort of like, it's the closest thing I can get to objective moral, right?
Yeah.
But there might be a time when, if we're talking about capital punishment, right? And let's say it's just a horrible crime committed against maybe, the child of a person, and this person
Or
is taking
a
pleasure
bunch of
in seeing,
kids in kindergarten at school.
well, I'm just saying, like, this person is taking pleasure in seeing this person taken off the earth.
Right.
So like maybe even then I can't. So like if we might have to put like systemically for pleasure, or ritually for
Yeah.
pleasure.
So I would say this, but if we have to put all these qualifiers on it, then every one of those qualifiers has something to do with our understanding from our community, from our culture, from something that we have been taught.
Mm-hmm.
So Bubba said, "What if you don't need taught?" It doesn't matter if either you need to be taught, you have been taught because you were raised somehow. You made it to adulthood. You didn't get there on your own. Babies need to be taught. They will be taught how to do things, how to even love, even care for, even, they can be taught that violence is bad. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're taught that God is a part of that for them. So my point is just that it just seems crazy to me that
Somebody would say God is the moral system,
that
like God is the moral system.
That the only way you can be moral is if and that you have, as the fear of hell and all of that. I think there's just as a sociologist, I think I would argue that the need to have a moral grounding, whether it's from God or not, is survival. We as human beings need each other to survive.
Mm. So you
and
would
to thrive.
So if so you just don't buy it. You just don't buy that. Okay.
Based? I don't know what that means.
Based. Yeah, it's I mean, it's like the kids say when you've got it right.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know what the kids say.
Yeah, we have to get a translator. AI is helpful.
How many children do you have, Luke?
Yeah. Luckily, I've taught quite a few children over the years.
Yeah.
But to be fair, I don't have any. Not too many of the. Now, when I was doing the game show.
Yeah.
We get the Gen Alpha kids coming up, and oh man, the stuff that they're saying, like what the Sigma, Riz, I mean, just like it's just,
yeah,
it's
There's a couple that does Gen X stuff, and they do like Weird Al type of music, and they do a bunch of stuff about Gen X, and they sat down with their teenage kids, and they said, they did a whole video on Gen Alpha language, and they said, how do we do? It was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's there. We got to. I mean, it's. We're just getting older, Billy.
Well, I have a friend who's older than you, and she thinks she's Gen Z.
Older than me and thinks she's Gen Z?
Yeah. She actually sometimes thinks she's more
older than
Gen
me
A.
is Gen X.
I know that, and she knows that, and it's just
she's
nuts
just not confused.
Well, I really talk better with the Gen Z. They know. You just think you do.
Well, Gen Z.
She's an influencer.
But Gen Z, I have. She's an influencer. Is it that what is her name? There's a little Appalachian girl.
Oh no.
That talks the most beautiful Appalachian accent I've ever heard.
No, Gail's Italian.
Oh, okay. I was hoping it was that one. Dang. All right. Well, anyway, let's continue on for a little bit, and then we're gonna wrap things up. We got about 10 minutes left.
I'm 58.
I've gone viral in like the late aughts, and we ended up getting a TV show on IFC. That's why we moved out here. So we moved out here with our wives and kids all together in 2011. And I kind of thought to myself, this is maybe an opportunity to start over a little bit. We went to a church that we had some friends at that we knew from out here. and it was in Hollywood, and it was like the music was awesome, and everyone was so cool, and they wore like the cool hats. It was like it was like hipster church, and it was so much different than what I came from.
Mm-hmm.
And the way they talked about these issues was, it was just more nuanced and gray. And I found myself thinking like, I think I could do this.
Mhm.
I think I could do this because, I guess ultimately if you backed this person into a corner, the pastor would probably believe all the stuff that I believe, but he's holding it a little bit more loosely. And
I love the
maybe I can
catfishing
kind of
by
have
hand
this
girl.
thing like, I love Jesus. And I remember writing in my journal,
Crazy to see that.
when Peter talks about, when Jesus is asking him if he's going to leave, and he's like, well, where else would I go?
Yeah.
I thought the same thing. I was like, what am I going to do? Become an atheist? Become non-religious? Become a different religion? It's just like, even if I'm not sure about this, I'm sure that Jesus is good for me.
Yes.
I'm sure that these ideas are good for me, and this idea of believing in resurrection and like this, I can kind of just maintain this. That's where I was when I moved out here. That lasted such a short period of time because when I would stop and I would just think about it, I'd be like, yeah, but it's probably not true. And I started finding people who had been through similar things I could talk to about these things.
Mm-hmm.
And you start just finding there's people who have, and also I started finding people, I can't remember exactly, they weren't really talking about it on YouTube, but there were people writing about it, blogs and that kind of thing. And you just start finding, oh, these people don't believe this anymore, but they're still good people who want the same thing out of life. Because my wife and I thought our marriage would end. We thought we
Right.
wouldn't have anything useful to share with our children. When you believe this idea that you've got the truth and that this is the most essential truth, and it isn't just about your salvation, it's about your life. Like your marriage is based on this commitment to Christ first.
Yeah.
Your kids and every decision that you make about them is based on this biblical understanding and this framework. You're going to throw that out. What are you going to do? What's going to happen to your marriage? What's going to happen to your kids? But then you start finding all these people who don't know what they think about it anymore, and they like still have
They're
solid
okay.
marriages, and their kids are still.
So for me, I want to say I was about 25. There's a guy that I talked to a good bit about a lot of different things. His name is Adrian Hill, and I remember I had gotten to this point. Now Adrian, he has been in seminary, and I think his strain is Methodist. So I hope to have him on here sometime talking. But his belief set, I think, changed a lot. As he went through seminary as well, and he said, I got to this point where I was just like, not even the resurrection, heaven, hell, nothing. He was like, but I was like, I still call myself Christian because of kind of this like, belief set. And then he was just like, but why? Right. And the thing is, he didn't really even ask a whole lot more whys. I kind of asked the rest of the whys myself. Like, why would I hold this one, like one religion in higher regard when there's a lot of religions that say the same thing? Or, I could have just intuited this kind of, maybe these empathetic, tolerant feelings, because it's like, hey, I can just kind of put myself in their shoes and, feel what they're feeling if I can try to do that. Right. So I never felt like he asked me, he said, why? And I started asking these whys, and I never felt like I had a good answer. So I finally was just like, the reality is, I'm an atheist. And it was like, I don't know, at that particular moment when I just finally said it to myself, I was like, I don't know. The next part was like, how do I live with this information, like of myself? And how am I supposed to like talk to my mother who, believes so heavily, right? And so, after that, there's a big association, guilt, a lot of guilt, and
Oh yeah.
just a lot of I think there, even my community of people that I've slowly let in to know this. I think a good portion of them are disappointed in me, for this kind of stuff. But like I don't know, I'm not disappointed in me, so I guess we're just at
Right.
odds,
Yeah.
right? I don't
Yeah.
know what to tell you. In that kind of if you're disappointed in me.
It's interesting. You mentioned earlier about the Facebook post that you made. I didn't see the video actually. I'll have to go and find that. But the post that you made, I remember thinking, boy, if more Christians had invested half the time into understanding their own faith, then the church would be a better place. That was my first reaction to what you said in that. By the way, is it Ed that's wrong latitude?
Yeah.
I have not heard of the Pastor Project, and apparently it's not the Pastor Project. I googled it. I use Bing, but I binged it, and the Pastor Project. There's two of them. One of them is called the American Pastor Project, and it is very much all about Christian nationalism. And the other one is a thing that is selling
Morning, y'all.
the idea of certain leadership
So,
techniques. And
sorry.
then, but what he's talking about is called the Clergy Project.
So here was the
Okay, go
video,
ahead.
if you're interested. So this
Yeah, I
was
think I missed that.
after I posted the pastor and atheist post. This was and this was
You need
still
to clean your
me.
Thomas Knighting.
I was still kind of like workshopping what I wanted to do, right?
Mhm.
And this was
Right.
pretty much right before I messaged you about the idea for this project. Morning, y'all.
Okay.
So, you're probably going through my stuff if you're interested in my stuff at all, and seeing me a couple days ago proclaiming my atheism, which is 100% true. That's not a lie. I say hi to Phoebe. But you're also seeing, probably following that, me wearing scripture on my shirt and quoting scripture, and I know that makes some people mad. I'm sorry about that, but I really, at this point, I'm trying to impart on you all what it would look like to mass deport 20 million people. Like, think in your head what that will look like to mass deport 20 million people. You've been to Neyland Stadium, that's 100,000 people. You can't just pick these people up and like drive them to the border and dump them off. I need you to think about what it will be like if that goes through. I love y'all. Sorry for the confusion. And moving forward. Anyway, so that was just in regard to, because I really did. The next day, I played on Vol Navy with that shirt, and I positioned myself behind a Trump flag that was waving, after the election. So, yeah, juxtaposition, right? Yeah, that was a rough night, Ed. It was after a cellgate. Yeah, I think I even mentioned, I'm like, I don't know if you would see down here, I'm halfway through the video, and I mentioned that I look like crap because I cellgated last night or whatever, but that's where that picture was taken of me with the Matthew 25:35 shirt. But yeah, I was just like, this is going bad. This is going to go bad, and it's all about, you're just not doing that, like, accept the stranger thing, Christians. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
and the other, the guy that is the the deportation czar, whatever his name is. I should know
Homan.
it by now. I don't. Yeah, if anybody was listening to him, he would say, "Well, we're only going to deport criminals. Those are the ones we're going after."
Yeah, but that's not 20 million.
But then he turns around and he says, when they interview him in a longer conversation, he'll say things
The
like,
misdemeanors that make what makes them this criminal that they have to.
misdemeanors means they broke the law, therefore they're criminal.
Yeah,
And
it's so it's
but he's selling the idea. He was selling the idea and still is selling the idea.
yeah.
That, oh no, we're only going against the violent criminals. And I'm,
But
well, who do you think that just no, now they're going after kids in school.
they're just going after like anybody that like that. I mean, they have to, because if you're going to get anywhere near that number,
Yeah, and then they've Tennessee just passed a law that if you're not a legal immigrant, then you can't get public education, you can't get health care.
I mean, it's just it's so hateful.
It's just cruelty for
Yeah.
the sake of being cruel, and they're eating it up and enjoying it, and that's the most
Sick.
unchristian thing that I can imagine.
Well, I mean, I don't.
It's also the most inhumane thing that I can imagine.
Anyway. All right. Well,
I'm
you know
sure
what?
there are other
Let's call it on that. But that was that was me. That
You're
was
going to
me.
see me wearing a lot of Bible verse shirts because
yeah, that was me the day after I posted that big atheist post, right? And wore like Matthew 25:35 shirt. It was like the explanation of why you're seeing this after I posted that. It's what, and that was kind of how this idea was formed. Again, the goal of the project is always more to find the common ground.
Yeah, and I think that that was what attracted me to this idea. And I think we both felt, well, we'll grow into whatever it's going to look like. But
Sure. I think we've probably done enough on this video. I'm kind of ready to get into like I think next week we'll talk more about probably what's going on in LA and the protests, and just like what would, how can we come to some kind of accord on what's going on right now? Because I mean, I was talking to Ed earlier about this today. Just like, sure, you have people committing like violent destruction of property, and there's violence, and it's very scary stuff. But then there's also like an underlying conversation about, what are the undercurrents of the event? Like why would a community like Los Angeles, in certain parts of Los Angeles, stand up and say, ICE, you just can't come here. We don't comply with your law. Why you have to, like, you say you have authority, but you don't have authority unless we comply. And we've decided right now not to comply to ICE. And then, now we've got an escalation to where there's, Marines there.
Right. And I again haven't been able to follow it closely, but I did hear something, and you could tell me if I'm just completely wrong, that the bringing the National Guard in was being done after everything had kind of settled, and now the National Guard comes and that just inflames it again. And then there's also use of video from 2020 being pulled out to say, look, see what's happening, and it's not even from this event.
Yeah, there's some stuff though. I mean, I saw some cop cars get attacked. It's real.
Yeah.
It's happening. I don't want to, like, we don't have to like pretend like, the nature of this kind of protest, right? There's all kinds of protests, but the nature of this kind of protest is that this is a protest against an overreaching authority. And what happens is any kind of authority that is there, you're protesting against them. And, you know, it's just like a brew for, you know, confrontation. And unfortunately, it sometimes, you know, if we're looking at it historically, sometimes that takes like, you know, people standing up to authority, which causes, the violence occurs because of this when you stand up to authority.
Yeah.
You know, and it's an ugly mechanism of our history, but it's a mechanism nonetheless.
Yeah, protest doesn't always look like a guy standing in front.
Yeah, in San
With,
Fran, yeah. It's, you know, I mean,
for you young whippersnappers, that's in China.
I mean, in this case, you know, they're saying we're here to come take, I mean, like LA, right? Can you imagine the amount of, you know, one of the things they're saying in the protests are, you know, this was Mexico before it was, you know, the U.S. It was taken, you know, what is this imaginary border that you guys have made? And, you know, and I kind of jive with that, you know, and, you know, but even then, just
on the
like,
flip side, that gives ammunition to the other side.
but just ripping people out of the communities in this way, in this fashion. And,
it's not humane.
Well, but, and then let alone what they're doing with them. I'm just saying, just like people are not going to jive with that, you know, especially if it's like, you know, like LA. They're like,
yeah,
you're going to LA and doing that.
I was in Chattanooga and there was a raid on a chicken plant and some other places. And I was coaching a girls soccer team, and, you know, one of those kids came home from school and there was no mom. And there's no way to know where mom is because they lose rights and they don't get, you know, the right to counsel. They don't get a phone call. They don't get, you know, they couldn't even tell you, well, we sent them to Texas or Florida or wherever. And that's just not, unfortunately, that's what the laws allow, but that doesn't make it right.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, I mean, that's the thing, you know, when discussing the law, right? I mean, just because it's a law doesn't make it, like, you know, righteous.
Right, exactly. It's not.
Yeah, I mean, you know, speaking out against it, standing up against.
I have a friend that arranged for a guy who wrote the book on immigration law. He was with ACLU and some other things, and he came and he's trying to give hope to this community that's been devastated by people being ripped out of there, and the problem is all he can really do is say you need to know your rights, but there's not a lot we can do, you know, and it's that's again comes back to this cruelty is just they're doing cruelty for pleasure, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to figure out what even, like, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's Stephen Miller, you know, his, you know, designs.
Oh yeah, he's creepy.
So,
and I don't just mean that physically.
No, I mean, just, yeah. All right, well, let's end it on that, and then let's I think I think we've said all we can really say about Rhett McLaughlin and what you know, when you deconstruct what it kind of looks like, and, you know, I've given my perspective on it. And really, you know, it's not really the goal of our mission to talk about this kind of stuff often. It's more just, I think maybe just more of a backstory, you know, edition.
I think it was helpful. It helps me understand myself a little better. It's always good to have that.
Right on, man. I'm glad we can help you with yourself.
That's right. But it's it's I think a part of what we were targeting is trying to help people to understand, especially younger men, to understand the idea that to be a man doesn't mean this one definition of machoism. That you can be a thoughtful, thinking person who cares, and all of those things matter too. And so I think addressing these issues, and it's helpful to have seen that little video you just posted too.
Oh,
You
interesting.
just showed, not posted, but showed.
Yeah, from the day after I posted the
Yeah.
atheist rant.
Well, and to know that the reason for your posting that was with the shirt, and I've held in here the whole that Matthew 25 text, while it may not mean the same to you as it might have meant to me, I think we find common ground on that for sure. Yeah, he has all of those things, Bubba.
All right.
So.
Well, guys, we're going to end the stream, and we're going to find something else to talk about next week. So we will holler at y'all later. Ed, Bubba, Dara, thanks for chatting in. See y'all next time.
Thank y'all.
All right.
So the Pirates are only 10 games. No, I can't even do math. 8 games behind you.
In the race for the toilet.
Oh no, we're 8 games ahead of you on that.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, I guess you're ahead that way.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean,
Yeah.
it is the
We're 8
toilet,
games
so
behind.
like, no, you would still be
Yeah.
below because you're flushing.
That's right. We're but they're getting better.
397. Listen, you could be the Rockies. Look at that.
Yeah, I know. But the Pirates, like, if they've won 5 games. They won 4 in a row for the first time. They beat the Phillies. They swept the Phillies. They're doing better hitting. Today they scored 2, but yesterday they scored 10. And on the other hand, Mitch Keller now has 9 quality starts and 1 win. When he pitches, they do not score.
Interesting.
He has the lowest
So that's just like
runs
a
per
so that's just like a
lowest
freak
runs per
thing.
game when he pitches. It is. He's
I mean,
got
just, what do you do about that?
his ERA is like it just went over 4 because he had kind of a bad game the last outing.
Yeah.
But it had been low 3s, and
They've just been anemic in scoring runs.
Yeah, and the best pitcher in baseball by many people's is Paul Skeens.
They'll have some every now and then, but it's like 2. Yeah.
They've had like 4 games where they scored 10 runs. But they've
also had how many games where they've scored like 1 or 2?
Right. Yeah, and they had 10. They tied the major league record for most games in a row not scoring more than 4 runs.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like it just seems like everything's real.
Yeah, but they're right now. If you look up the top 5 hitters since May, I think there was early May, something like that. 3 of the top 5 are Pirates. Those 3 batters are hitting, well in the 300. The people that are hitting better than them are Freddie Freeman and in the National League, I should say. And
This
Freddie
is ridiculous
Freeman
right
and
here.
I know he's insane. It's just how is a guy who hits that many home runs hitting 390? And it was his slugging percentage has got to be so far. Slugging is 779.
776. Yeah.
It's a tiny word text. I'm like, who's even close? Nobody.
Yeah. I mean, slugging wise.
Yeah, look at that.
Enormous.
It's just, and of course, there's not a single Pirate on that list, nor is there a single Red on that, down to 25.
Yeah, so let's see. Yeah, let's see. We get.
And the Reds play in that ballpark, built for home runs.
We do home runs. Ellie De La Cruz.
And O'Neill is up on higher.
Yeah,
He's at 20.
O'Neill Cruz. The Cruzes. This is ugly right here,
O'Neill.
though.
Yeah. What's De La Cruz?
Pretty ugly also. I don't think it's that bad. It's like 240 something. It's up to 257.
What about strikeouts? Because they're both terrible.
I don't know if they had that. I have to go advanced.
Yeah, but K's right by balls walks.
Oh, there. Okay, yeah. So here's De La Cruz. K's is this one. 80. That's a lot.
And O'Neill has 85. They're both pretty high up on the list.
Yeah,
and part of that's
we could just do this,
I was suggesting that earlier, but yeah. See,
we have one that's higher though. Riley Green of Detroit.
Yeah.
He's at 280. This guy's pretty good. 280, 13 home runs, 44 RBIs,
19 walks.
He strikes out a ton.
19 walks. He's got 19 walks.
I mean, is that good or bad? I guess that's bad.
Cruz had a lot more. But
yeah, Cruz has 38. Your Cruz.
Yeah. De La Cruz is also behind.
That's pretty good for a shortstop that I wouldn't call really necessarily a hitting star.
De La Cruz?
Yeah.
He's got all the tools. He's got all the tools. Cruz is beating him in stolen bases too.
So 23 here.
Yeah.
Well, let's just do this.
De La Cruz is up there. I don't know how many. Oh, somebody passed him.
20.
Cruz. Tampa Bay's in the American League, isn't he?
Yeah.
Oh, Ellie De La Cruz has right behind that, isn't it?
20. I mean, he's
20.
He's in the neighborhood.
So he's number 2 in the National League, unless
his biggest problem probably is this.
3 in the National League. Yeah, both of them is. I mean, the average is terrible. Cruz today struck out like 3 times and then hit a home run that was stood and watched it. He didn't even stand and watch it. He just stood and looked at the dugout. It was so obvious it was a home run. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
And it didn't clear the ballpark. It just was so high and so long that it just was, the second he hit it, you go, okay, that's a home run.
See, this is what's crazy about Aaron Judge. His on-base percentage is .491. Golly, that's just...
He's got 44 walks.
Yeah, I mean, people aren't going to want to pitch to him.
I mean, why do you? I mean, he's not leading the league in RBIs, which is interesting. But
well, that also depends a lot on how your team's doing, I guess.
It absolutely does.
But I mean, he's pretty high up there. He's second. I mean, these player names, I hardly know any of them.
So the kid that's Pete Crow Armstrong, he is his mother was the actress who played in the movie about the kid with the weird, the arm that he could throw in.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
he
He
could
got
pitch for
he got the tendon sewed on wrong or something, and it created
yeah,
like a
and
big
that
rubber
his
band.
mother was that's who his mother is. So it's interesting. Yeah. Well, it's been more fun to watch the Pirates since they fired their manager.
Oh yeah.
They're actually they're playing a little differently, and they're back to stealing bases again, and things like that I think make it more interesting. They've bunted more to get on base, so it's been interesting.
This is
Wonder what the
what's
bus
going
is
on in
for.
LA right now. This is the AP feed.
Yeah, I saw them
Curfew.
announcing the curfew, and it's interesting. The curfew does not apply to residents in the area, homeless folks, police, and officials, and credentialed press. So I'm like, that's a lot of people. How do they know that person doesn't
I
live
guess they
there?
feel like that gives them an excuse to ID them.
Yeah,
See if they're a
that's true.
resident.
And that was the police doing it. It wasn't the National Guard or anybody.
Yeah, I guess we'll see what happens. All right,
Yeah.
Billy, I'm gonna get out of here, man. Thank you again,
Yep.
sir. I hope I wasn't too pushy in any way on this one, because I know, like, when you're talking about, like, did it happen, the resurrection, it's sensitive, So
Yeah, I guess I'm not, personally, I'm not offended by that at all. So,
yeah,
honest to
but
God, the only thing that offends me is people trying to conflate the church and the nation.
sure. Well, we're going to be going after them quite a bit, so I need to get back into some of those Christy Burke videos that we did and chop them up and make some short stuff to promote more. I got again like another notification that said my distribution has been increased yet again. So more people are seeing this organically,
Oh, good.
but who knows? All right, man. I'll holler at you later.
All right. Have fun.
See it.